All right, Senator Gatti, did you want to go next, or did you need to be in another committee? All right, members, we've kind of run through what we thought were the most of the non-controversial things on our agenda, although that's never a guarantee in this committee, as we can see. And so I'm going to move that we adopt time limits now. I'm going to move that we limit the author's opening and closing to 5 minutes each, and that we adopt the 2-minute rule on witness testimony and the 3-minute rule on question and answers by members with opportunity for extension by request. Is there any objection to the adoption of these time limits? Hearing none, the time limits are now in effect for the rest of the committee meeting. Senator Gatti, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of this committee. This bill emanates out of 2 lawsuits that were filed in my district, one in Bossier Parish and one in Webster Parish. The students sitting with me and many of their peers were praying so much at school, and their coaches and their principals were praying with them so much that they received a citation from the federal court to stop, and in form of a lawsuit. What that resulted in, as many of you know, y'all are very familiar with this issue. Immediately the school board had to meet, and they adopted some type of handbook reform. And I just want to read to you the current draft of the handbook that was voted on in 2 of the 4 parishes I represent. It says, school employees shall not participate in any way in a prayer with students during or in conjunction with instructional periods or any school event. School officials, which means teachers, coaches, principals, shall not offer a prayer, recite a prayer alongside or with students, bow their heads, kneel, join hands, or otherwise posture in any manner that is likely to be perceived as an endorsement of the prayer. This creates huge problems for our coaches and our teachers, especially those that volunteer their time for FCA or pro-life groups that are on campus, because they are basically very worried and upset that they will get in trouble, because y'all know when we put things in the handbook and you violate the things in a handbook, it leads to discipline. Since this has been put in place, which happened after the Senate Education Committee passed this out of committee, this conversation I'm going to tell you about happened after we passed this out unanimously on a Bagneris Thursday with 17 co-authors. Since then, coaches and teachers have heard about the bill that really came from the students. And they have said, I hope this will help us, because the other day I accidentally bowed my head. And I'm worried I might get turned in for that. And that may seem kind of facetious to us, but I'll tell you, back home in these 2 parishes, it's the buckle of the Bible Belt, as my friend Mike Johnson calls it. It is the buckle of the Bible Belt, and that is what it is. And so these coaches and teachers are very worried. And so what came from this bill, and talking with a group of students from my area, my wife, the psychologist, says I relate really good to students. That's my age group that I can participate in really well. But they said, Senator Gatti, is there a way we can fix this? And a few of us put our heads together and said, y'all really lost all your rights as teachers. You really can't bow your head. It can't get any worse than that. If you can't kneel down because somebody's grandma just died on the football team, if you can't say, hey, team captain, why don't you lead us in prayer? You can't even say, hey, lead us in prayer. And somebody said, well, Ryan, why are you so upset with student-led prayer? And I said, would you put your child on a 7-year-old student-led t-ball team? Of course you wouldn't. You'd want 5 or 6 coaches out there to help those kids know what they were doing. And in Bossier, we have a lot of teachers who go to the same church as all the students in their class. Just like down south, we have people that go to Mass on Sunday. Everybody in the school goes to the same Mass on the same Sunday. But here's the thing, between Monday and Friday, they're under a gag order. So with my minute and a half I have left, I'll just tell you this. What this bill does is it's a paradigm shift. The Supreme Court has said since Ellery Schimpf said he didn't want to pray at school anymore in 1956, the Supreme Court has been consistent with one concept. The parent holds the right to determine who prays with their child. And many times these cases have started, in this case in Bossier and the case in Webster happened because the school board or the principal from the top down was forcing prayer on the community, and that's wrong. So when we looked at it, we kind of turned it upside down. We said, what if the parent sends in a permission slip and says, Coach, look, I'm waiving my rights to the First Amendment. Go ahead and pray with my kid. I mean, they're being bullied. You know, they're under stress. They're under anxiety. You have them longer than I do, Coach. We want you to know that you can pray with them, and we're not going to sue you over it. And as I traveled through my district the last years, I visited every school in my district, and this wasn't an issue. Because the teachers would say, oh, yeah, that's little Johnny. You know, he has a cutting problem, and we're working on it with the counselor, and we've talked to his mama. We pray for him every day. We pray with him, and he's getting better. Hey, this is Jenny. She's getting bullied because of her weight and her grades, and we pray with her every day, and we want to make sure she's good. Well, those same teachers have called me back and said, hey, we can't kneel. We can't even ask the other students to pray for little Johnny anymore. This is a big deal. So the constitutional concept is very simple. We allow people to waive their Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights with Miranda. If you've watched Matlock or Y50, you're familiar with this in-depth constitutional analysis that happens. If you sign a card, you can be put in jail for incriminating yourself. The parents' right that the courts have said they have under the First Amendment to not hear prayer from any coach, I think the courts assume that we don't want to hear prayer over our kids from our coaches that we trust. So this bill allows for a permission slip. It allows the parent to hold their right and say, look, and I've told my coaches that coach my daughters in volleyball and basketball, I've said, look, I do not mind you praying with my daughter. If you need me to put that in writing, that's fine. They lost their sister last year. They're in high school. This is very, very tough on them. Please pray with them. And many have said, you know, if you hadn't given me this, I would have felt uncomfortable bowing my head, kneeling down, or grabbing your daughter's hand and just praying with them. So that's what the bill does, and I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you, Senator Gatti. Representative Simon, do you want to ask your question now, or you want to wait for the other two at the table to give their testimony? We have a white card and some green cards. Okay. It's not the appropriate time yet, but we'll make a note of that.
Into that.
Thank you. All right, Representative Edmonds, did you want to ask your question now, or you want to let them? Okay. All right. So we have Jacob Rhymes with Protect Prayer and Katie Walker with Protect Prayer. I assume that's who's at the table here. Ms. Walker, you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Katie Walker, and I'm a senior at Houghton High School. Just kind of a real situation that we're kind of in. My dad is a football coach. He coaches basketball, track, all of that kind of stuff. He's been coaching for over 20 years and could previously ask students, you know, hey, lead us in the Lord's Prayer before we get started with our game or our practice, things like that. And since our parish has now adopted this policy, he can't be anywhere near or around whatever prayer happens. So even if a student leads it, like, he can't facilitate it, be around it, or even ask them to do it. Our FCA sponsors, First Priority, things like that, we can't have them pray with us, bow their heads like he said. And these are the people that we look up to, that we want to be with us and guide us in our relationship with Christ as well as our education. And like you said, these are people we go to church with. This is who we want to be mentored by. And this prayer waiver is essential to us being able to do it legally and have a piece of paper written that says, yes, I allow my child to be able to pray with you as a teacher, coach, or anything like that. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Walker. And Mr. Rhymes?
My name is Jacob Rhymes. I'm also a senior at Houghton High School. And just because you just see Houghton High School here today does not mean that the rest of the parishes are not represented, because sadly we kind of knew about this on short notice, so only us two got to come down and support and speak on it. But back home we see so many students in support of this. We spoke of the prayer waivers earlier, and in theory what it's going to do is it's going to waive that parent's right that the teacher will be able to pray with the student, which is awesome. And we've had so many students already sign these prayer waivers and get these back to us. We've seen hundreds come to our rallies, and the best thing about it all is this is what the students want. I mean, with the help of Senator Gatti, with the legal stuff, aside from that, everything has been student-led, and it's something that the students want, and the parish and everyone has gotten behind in a sense, and it's just so encouraging. And so what this prayer waiver would do is basically, if everyone in the FCA club signs this waiver, or if everyone on the football team, that would allow the teacher or the coach or the club sponsor to be able to engage in religious expression with the student or students that are in attendance. And I think that's so important because, like it was said, we spend all day with these teachers, and we really look up to them, and we hope that they mentor us with our walk with Christ. And so I just think that it's really important myself, and I'm speaking on behalf of several other students, that we need this prayer waiver to be able to pass so we can continue.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rhymes. Y'all both did a very good job. I have kind of a wonky civil law question for you, Senator Gatti. And are we waiving here? Isn't this the establishment clause that we would be waiving? And can you waive the establishment clause?
Well, and I think that's a really good question, because we allow folks to waive other rights within the Bill of Rights, and we don't make it complicated. If they have a knowing waiver and they know the right they have and they're waiving that right, and we see it in situations where in criminal law, in the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments, where people who are drunk or just committed murder can confess and sign a little card on like it's a 3x5 index card, and they sign it, and they've read their Miranda warning, and they can waive those rights. I think the question is, why do we have to do it this way? So that a coach with 20 kids on the soccer team and they all go to church together, why do we have to jump through this hoop so they can pray? And the answer to that question is because the handbook says you can't bow your head, kneel, you can't clasp your hands together. I was raised Catholic, and my dad instinctively makes the sign of the cross pass in the church, anytime he hears a prayer. And that's the way that I was raised. And if my dad was a coach, he could not do that, because that is a distinct traditional sign of reverence to the prayer. And so that's one of those things that. So the question is, can you waive a constitutional right? And I think the courts have said, look, the parent's right is sacrosanct. And every case that has trickled down has been the school board forcing kids whose parents don't want them to be prayed with to be prayed with. So this changes that.
I think my question is, I don't think the establishment right is a right that those parents have. I think it's a right that other people have. So I'm not sure that these are the right people to waive the establishment It's just kind of, I know it's kind of a wonky question.
I think we've struggled with that. We've grappled with that a lot. We've called lawyers all over the place. Criminal lawyers seem to know more about waiving rights than any other lawyers, the goods and the bads and the uglies of that. And that is why we added the unanimous clause. It has to be unanimous. So if coach looks at the roll and there's 50 kids on the team, and only 49 have turned it in, he has to leave the room. He can't be around it. So we're tipping our hat to the power of the Establishment Clause, and in those situations, I think that we're tipping our hat to that. And I think that's what the courts are going to look for is, wait a minute, what if only half turn it in? What does the coach do? Well, we said clearly in the law it has to be unanimous, and I think we are tipping our hat to the strength of the Establishment Clause. Now the question then becomes, if all of the kids in a school in South Louisiana sign this, how can the Establishment Clause be violated? Well, you have to have someone that can show injury. That's the first step in the analysis of the Establishment Clause. For instance, in Tangipahoa Parish, a family went to the school board meeting so they could hear the prayer, so they could be injured, and then they had standing. You see? But if everyone in the classroom or everyone on the team has signed the waiver, then there's no injury. That's what waivers do. Waivers say, if I'm injured, then I waive my right to sue you. And so that's why we have to use the nasty term of a waiver, because it does say that it's very and so then the next question we typically get asked is, how can a room of 10
my time is up, and so a lot of other people have questions, so I'm gonna move on to someone else's question. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Representative Edmonds.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Thank you, Senator Gatti, and students, by the way, and all of our students here. We're glad you're here. Boy, I've been up almost all night on this one. I don't think there's anybody that supports prayer in schools and have fought for religious freedom, and I don't mean this in any kind of arrogant way, but I've given my whole life to ministry, all of it, since I was 18 years old. And I have, as a pastor, decided that I would venture out into the area of religious freedom on, I can't even count the times. But this bill, and Senator, I just want to vet it a little bit.
Sure.
I think what Representative Landry's already begun. Are you a constitutional attorney?
No, sir.
So have you defended any religious liberty cases? Is that any expertise? And I don't mean this.
No.
I just want to know where we are.
Yeah, the origin of this bill came from meeting with constituents, students, teachers, looking at previous cases and talking to other attorneys who do this kind of work.
So to me, as I hear the definition of the table, one is the handbook. I would say your handbook is by the line anyway. I think there's already rights afforded that handbook is violated. I went to Alliance Defending Freedom's website last night and looked at it. Public teachers are both individual citizen age. This is on their website. They're one of the premier First Amendment rights, Christian First Amendment rights organizations in America. Teachers do receive First Amendment protections. Teachers and coaches can engage in religious activities outside of non-instructional time. For example, a teacher can form school Bible study groups, participate in prayer groups with other adults. And what I'm saying to, without going through a whole list, and time is going to be the problem on this, is that these things are afforded regardless of what that handbook has done, and I think we see some violation. But at the same time, I think this particular bill, because we're taking a government employee, every case that I could read, and I read last night Santa Fe Independent School District versus Doe. I read Fifth Circuit case Doe versus Duncanville. I read Cairnby versus Treen. Every one of them, this bill would have been in violation and would have failed every time. And so as I look at this, in fact, in the language of Mergens versus Edwards versus Aguilar, the quote, school district representatives' participation in these prayers improperly entangles it in religion and signals an unconstitutional endorsement of religion. And the problem that I have here, and want your response is that we have worked for decades defending religious freedom, and my fear is, great fear, it's not that I want every child to pray and every parent. I want all those things. I want all that. But for the work that we've done, I see that we create standing in some of these situations that will become more of a nemesis to our moving forward than what you already have. I would like to ask a couple of questions. I see Professor Gatti is here, and she is a constitutional professor.
Edmonds, would you like an extension of your time?
I would like an extension, and I'd like her to answer a couple of questions on the constitutionality of this bill, not as it relates to the handbook, because in the bill, Professor, in number 2 of the bill, it says any school employee may attend and participate in the gathering if it occurs before the employee's workday begins or after the employee's workday ends, and then it goes on to talk about that outside of this parent and legal guardian signing a waiver, that's a whole other set of questions. But could you speak into what my concerns are here today, of probably all of our concerns of we want to help our students, we don't want our coaches and teachers violated, but we also know that this is a long-time fight, and I know you've been involved in it, and I'll yield that.
Yes, I'll introduce myself for the record. My name is Professor Michelle Gatti. I'm a professor of constitutional law at Southern University for the past 26 years. I teach the law and religion course there. I've also taught at Georgetown and at American University's Washington School of Law. I helped draft and get through the legislature a few years ago our religious liberty bill that Louisiana has. It's one of the strongest in the country, and I am an allied attorney with the Alliance Defending Freedom, and have been for actually 30 years, I guess, because I was with the Rutherford Foundation before that, representing religious free exercise and homeschooling and things like that. So I do come with a good bit of experience with that. What I would just like to inform, going purely legal on everyone, the tests are simple. Representative Edmonds, you cited the Doe versus Duncan Independent School District case. That's a Fifth Circuit case. There's been a more recent Fifth Circuit case that's called Croft versus Texas, which had a good result, had to do with moments of silence. It's a 2009 case, but even in that, this would not hold up under that Fifth Circuit ruling because the distinctions were made between the two situations. I certainly would love for teachers to be able to pray with students most of the time, and it's great if you have a school or a jurisdiction of the state that has everyone that lives in it of the same religion. That might work, but we don't. We live in a very diverse society, and you've got people of all religions at our schools. And the concerns that the courts have had over time is basically kind of in reverse, the discrimination against the students that are not of the same religion. The tests that are set out, those that are lawyers on the committee would be very familiar, I'm sure, from even law school with the Lemon test, having heard the Lemon test. So it's been around since the 60s. Well, anyway, there's three prongs to that. They look at this law. They would look at your law, Senator Gatti, and they would ask, does it have a secular purpose? Secular meaning non-religious. Well, there's simply no way that you can argue that this bill has a secular purpose. It's strictly a religious purpose in this bill. 2, is its primary effect advancing or inhibiting religion? Yes, it is advancing religion. There's no question about that, and I don't think Senator Gatti would argue otherwise.
Excuse me, Professor Gatti.
I had time talking to the Lemon tester. I would have brought my other notebook.
Representative Edmonds, do you want another extension of your time?
Please.
Okay.
The third prong is, does it excessively entangle government with religion? Now, the Doe versus Duncan Independent School District out of the Texas area was very similar to what you're describing. It is a coach that was praying with the basketball players in the gym and on the court both. Student initiated, arguably. Well, they have a new student come to school, and that student is not a Christian, and that student felt coerced to go along with what everybody else was doing, which is the big concern by the court in religion in the schools, is that students will feel coerced to go along. So she went along. A number of weeks later, Dad goes to one of the basketball games, sees his daughter praying with the team on the floor of the basketball court. She comes home and he asks her, did you feel comfortable doing that? And she said, no, but I didn't feel like I could say no. And so ultimately, because the school wouldn't give in, there comes the lawsuit. And what happens with a lawsuit right now, and this is amending one provision, but Louisiana has some of the strongest school prayer laws that are possible on our books right now. And I can guarantee you this law passes, we will be sued. The state will be sued. And at issue will be not just this particular section of our law, but all of our laws on prayer in the school. Which are very protective right now, including this one before it's amended. It's we have pushed the envelope every time. We came back. I believe most of these were enacted in 1995, right after this decision was pending in the Fifth Circuit. And then we have one that was, I believe, enacted in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. But we've pushed the envelope where we can. This is not an area that we can push the envelope in. And I have checked. I tried to reach Senator Gatti and speak to him about this, and Senator Milkovich has a bill, too, that's even broader than Senator Gatti's bill. I have been in touch with other attorneys with religious legal associations. I have a letter from them. I don't have time to read the letter, I presume, but this is from Kim Colby, the director for the Center of Law and Religious Freedom in the Christian Legal Society, Nate Kellum, chief counsel for the Center for Religious Expression, Matt Staver, the founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, Congressman Mike Johnson, who before his current position was the former senior legal counsel with the Alliance Defending Freedom. And I also have a letter from, I forgot I had this second letter here, let me see.
Now, are those folks against this bill? Is that
They
what you're
are,
saying? Okay.
yes, and this letter explains why they're against it.
I haven't received that letter.
Let's see, well,
You know when that letter is dated?
Yes.
Is it yesterday or?
it's April 30th.
I haven't received. I mean, that's something as a. And the wedding sing,
I'm
quoting
sorry,
the
yeah.
wedding singer. I wish they would have told me that yesterday.
Yeah, I was trying to reach you, Senator.
Well, I've got
I was
an
trying to
email,
reach
and my
you.
cell phone is limited to 80,000 people that have it. So I appreciate
This
you.
other letter is from First Liberty Institute, as the largest legal organization in the nation dedicated exclusively to protecting religious liberty for all Americans.
Let me interrupt you. Your time is up again, Representative Edmonds. Do you want another extension?
No.
Yes. Yes. No. Okay. Professor Gatti, you can enter those into the record if you want, but we don't have time to read them out loud. So, and I encourage you to share them with Senator Gatti as well.
That would be nice. And I would just like to respond to that because we have a response.
We have a
At
lot
that
of
time.
questions, so can we move on?
Well, I'll
You can-
simply say
okay,
that
briefly, can you
every case
respond?
she mentioned, a parent was injured because their child's relationship was interfered with. The prayer under our bill is not implemented unless there is unanimous. That means everyone on the volleyball team. If somebody joins the volleyball team, like in Duncanville, the coach can't pray. If there is one person that holds out, prayer does not happen. So that's the difference
Okay.
in our bill and Duncanville, and it solves that problem.
Representative Landry, could I respond to that just in terms of?
Very briefly.
I mean, it
It's-
is brief.
we're
The
really-
the
we're
problem
on
is
question and
that,
answers
I mean, if
with
the prayers
members,
were
so
taking
not
place
really
in
debate at
private
the
where no
table.
one else could observe it taking place, that could be different. But if they're going to take place in a dressing room where there are other people that could walk in and out, if they're taking place on the basketball court or the football field or whatever else it might be on the school grounds where other people could walk by or see it, if word gets out that this particular teacher is of this Christian faith and is praying with certain students, the concern is that those students then have a closer relationship or some kind of a priority because they pray with this particular teacher, and that students who don't do that, whether they're on the team or not, then might be
There's no case law on
ostracized.
third-party injury. It has to be, to have standing under the Establishment Clause, you have to have injury.
Okay.
And standing is a good
Let's
point.
move on to member questions because
Ricochet
we
prayer
don't really,
becomes a
we can't
standing
have
issue.
a debate between the two of y'all at the table without the members being involved in it. So Representative Leger for a question.
Had yourself.
Representative Leger?
Thank you. I'm just letting them exchange cell phone numbers. My first question is: Are both of your names Gatti? Is that correct?
I'm one letter away from being a Gatti, and she has a GH.
Okay.
Starter.
Well, I just found
Mine's
that
like
interesting.
ghetto, but with an I.
And I grew up in the Gatto. That's what we call it, our hometown, when I grew up.
So there's just a lot in common going on down there.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's what we're saying. So, Senator Gatti, can I just pose this question to you? What do you understand the current law to be in the state of Louisiana as it relates to prayer in school?
Well, I think the current law is that students can do whatever they want to do, and if teachers are praying, they can pray till they get served with a federal lawsuit. And when they get served with a federal lawsuit, their attorneys, some of that are listed on that letter she just sent, will meet with the school board behind closed doors, and they will tell them, school board, you have to put this in your handbook. This specific language. Coach can't kneel, pray, make the sign of the cross, show any reverence to the prayer. And then the handbook then becomes the law for a parish that is under a federal lawsuit. That's not a law professor.
That's a practical.
That is telling you as a practitioner of how this has worked out in our hometowns.
And so the handbook, in your view, the handbook, I guess, is a school board handbook or a individual school?
Well,
or
every teacher must sign the handbook under a penalty of disciplinary action. So when they sign that handbook, many are going to have to say, I will no longer bow my head to keep my job and keep my retirement. And many of the teachers in my area are not going to sign that. Many have already violated the handbook. Many are already very upset about this happening because every kid in their class is okay with them doing this. Now, there may be somebody, here's a ricochet prayer on the football team half a mile away, and maybe they have standing under the current Constitution to come in and say that a class with 100% participation in a permission slip that offends them, but is that what we want the law to be from this body? That's the question we have to ask today. Is that the law we want to reverberate from this body? So.
Well, tell me if you can agree with this statement or not, because I'm just trying to get as broad of a understanding as possible. Is it correct that currently organized prayer in a public school setting, whether in the classroom or at a school-sponsored event, is considered unconstitutional?
I believe that's the current status.
There is, however, constitutionally permitted prayer that is voluntary, student-led prayer that does not interfere with the school's mission.
That's correct.
And so what you're proposing is, the way I read it anyway, is voluntary prayer that is authorized by the students in writing.
It's actually authorized by the parent. The courts have said the parent holds the right over the child.
That's what I mean. There's written evidence of a parental permission for a student to be involved in voluntary prayer, and for that voluntary prayer to also include an employee if it does not interfere with their work duties.
Excuse me, Representative Leger, your time is up. Would you like an extension
yes,
of your time? Okay.
Okay, is that correct? I mean, that's what you're proposing, right?
Yes, it takes into account the Duncanville case, even all the way back to Abington versus Schimpf, where the courts have said a parent complained about their kid being made to pray. Well, our situation in our neck of the woods is different. You have a classroom of 20 kids or a football team of 50 kids. All 50 kids are upset that the coach cannot say, "Hey, Jimmy, you lead us in prayer today." I mean, that's the molecular application of this.
So what you're saying is that their freedom of expression is being infringed because they're not being authorized to participate in prayer?
Well, there's no doubt that that's the feeling the coaches and teachers have today.
And students.
Yes.
And so your bill isn't requiring anyone to participate in an activity that they're uncomfortable with, but it's authorizing an organization to unanimously concur with participation if they have parental consent to do so.
That's correct.
I assume that you're not filing this so that there will be lawsuits filed.
No, we're trying to file this so that our teachers don't get sued for praying in a room where everybody's okay with them praying.
And yet you recognize that no matter what we do in this body has the potential of leading to lawsuits. Every bill that we pass.
Well, what I learned in
right?
law school was that a bill is not unconstitutional until a judge tells you.
Right. And my point is there are plenty of bills that we pass that are eventually challenged. Some are upheld, some are not. In any given aspect of what we do, not just in this particular area. So, I mean, that argument to me is, I think it's very clear that this body attempts to pass laws that we believe are in the best interest of the people of the state. We certainly have an oath to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state. However, it's also very unclear sometimes where those lines are drawn, and that's why we have the court system, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think these coaches and teachers deserve, with the students' idea, to push this forward. If it's
have you seen this done in any other place, or is this a solution that you've developed with people that have met with you?
We have developed a solution with the people who are struggling with the issue right now. This is an effort to protect the coaches and teachers' rights only in the very unique situation where 100% of the children in attendance have a permission slip signed by their parent.
And you've looked at the idea that there are a number of amendments in the Bill of Rights that provide for a waiver procedure, and you've attempted to apply that here so that there can be a distinct writing about the will of the parents in this instance.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you, Representative Leger. Representative Simon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to quote a good friend of mine, Senator Thompson, never let the Constitution get in the way of a good bill. And that was kind of where I was coming at with this kind of facetiously earlier. And I made that motion. I wanted to make it early on just to prove a point. And this is what I get frustrated with coming down here. This seems to be a very fundamental cause that we're trying to solve here. And been here long enough to know that I've seen enough constitutional fights on the floor of the House between constitutional lawyers. Never took place in one. I was never smart enough to, but I've seen this thing going back and forth, so I can see both sides of the issue. My only concern with this, and I still like your bill, I just wanted to hear the debate, and I like the debate on it. When you, and maybe Dr. Gatti could speak on this, when you have someone sign consent and someone doesn't, does that ever put that individual person legally, does that put them in a position of being injured?
That they don't sign the consent?
Yeah, calling someone out for not.
Yes, that's exactly what all of this is about, that you would call someone out. I mean, I had a question for Senator Gatti as to who was going to implement this request for parental permission to pray.
The students are.
So the coach, because that's what I think you're dealing with, would not be asking the students, I need you to get your parents' permission.
Not at all. In fact, the students formed a nonprofit specifically on that point so that they could be the data collectors of the waiver, and then before even presenting this to the school, if they didn't have unanimous consent from parents, then that coach would not even be approached. So that way there would not be any injury to a person who, as you said, might feel left out, because if all 30 students had come down to testify and you could hear from all of that, that would have been their heart. They don't want to leave anybody out. They want to hurt anybody. They want to injure anybody. But they have several sports teams where 100% of the kids all go to church together with a coach, and they don't feel like they should be under that gag order.
But
then we also pass a law for the entire state, and I'm just wondering, and so this is an opt-in type thing, would you say? If a school district doesn't want to do it, how do we go about that?
Well, if the school district has any say in whether or not that this happens, then I wouldn't have any opposition to that. The problem is I don't think the school board can put this waiver on their website. I don't think they can put it on their school website. I think it has to be student initiated. It has to come from the parent and from the student. But I'm sure there will be some that opt out, some that opt in, some that are very concerned. We have some districts that are very homogenous in their religions, and we have some districts that are very diverse. And so I think you would have a 0% chance of implementing this law in a diverse population. You would have a very good chance of implementing this process in a homogenous religious situation.
Excuse me, Representative Seymour, your time is up. Would you like an extension of your time?
Can I have one extension, please?
Sure.
And I guess where we're going with that is, and I don't want to step in Representative Edmonds, I follow his lead a lot of times on this, and he made some good points, and I don't want to hurt what we have going in any kind of way. And what assurances can you give me and give Representative Edmonds, anybody else in here, that we're not going to hurt or bring any harm to the movement that we have done with this law if it does pass from here?
Well, I think that when you look at this concept starting with the parent, not the school board, not the teacher, this movement is starting with students, and that there has to be unanimity. It has to be unanimous. Every child in the FCA is going to have to bring this to school with their parent. If one child in the FCA says, no, I don't want...
but there's not going to be a child collecting these at the school front gate. It's going to be going to the principal or whatever, and parents are going to get it to the...
No. It won't be from the principal to the PTA. It's going to be from the parent to this group. And I think sadly, that's how separated that we have to be in this process. As a dad, I have no problem with signing this and sending it to my daughter's volleyball coach or basketball coach. And that's where it starts.
Representative Simon.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I was just going to say the bill doesn't say that, though. I mean, that's how the school that he's dealt with might have this group, and they might do it without the school being involved in any way, but the bill doesn't say that.
Well, if we said that, would you feel better about it?
No, not really. Because let me give you an example. What if you have a Wiccan club at your school? And the Wiccan club decides, all of them with parental permission, that they're going to have a Wiccan ceremony out in the yard in the school. And so they put on their Wiccan ceremony with all of the parents in agreement for those children doing it, but it's out in front of the other students in the school. As a dad, would you be happy that your child at that public school is now going to witness some kind of a ceremony that's offering up a chicken to their god?
Well, I think that 0.00001% of the population is Wiccan. There's a better chance.
Guys, we can't have debates between the two of you there unless a member's facilitating it and asking you both the same questions.
I would have no problem.
I'm not going for the Wiccans.
Okay.
Well, I mean, but there are
We
many
still
other.
have some
I'm going
questions.
extremes, but there are many other diverse religions. Maybe not in your particular district, but in other districts, including even the Jewish religion, the Muslim religion, the Hindu religion, and a number of other religions. And this gives those groups at schools those same rights to do that at school, on the field, in front of other students, and endorsed
Right.
by the school.
Representative Wright for a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Gatti. Thank you, Professor Gatti. This has been very educational. Most of my questions have been answered or views expressed, but I do have one simple question. I've heard the term ricochet prayer, and I've heard a lot of prayers. What's a ricochet prayer?
There are cases percolating up because, and Professor knows more about this than I do, but the example given is not always Wiccan. If the bill is something else, this is the next extreme. The extreme is everybody on the football team to sign your waiver, Senator Gatti, and the coach is praying with them because Johnny just lost his mama in their prayer, and a guy from the track team, as he rounds the northeast corner of the track, is that a prayer that I hear? And then he would be injured as a third party, not beneficiary, I guess, in that case, but he would be injured, and then would he have standing to then go in and hire a lawyer and shut down the football team? And, that's the world we live in. Lawsuits, a lot of lawsuits get filed that are dismissed. And I think that's what I call a ricochet prayer, is the person is not in the room. They just kind of heard about it, that it might be happening in another room. And it's kind of like the parents in Tangipahoa. They heard the school board was praying before the meeting. Well, they weren't injured. The lawyer said, you're not injured until you hear it. So they went to a school board meeting for the first time, and they shut down the prayer at the school board meeting with a lawsuit. So that wasn't a ricochet prayer. They actually heard it. In the school setting, we're trying to protect that by having a unanimous consent from the parents before this is implemented. I do not think this will be implemented. The high standard that we put in the bill, it is highly unlikely you will have 100% unanimous consent anywhere in our state. But the few folks that want it, that need this, it will help them.
All right, Representative Falconer.
I'm not a constitutional lawyer, so I'm going to keep my comments strictly with the language that's being proposed. It says, starting on page 2, line 12, the parent or legal guardian of each student, and I presume that's where you get the unanimous consent requirement, in attendance at the gathering with whom the employee prays, has submitted a signed request. So this means every time a single prayer is given, your expectation is that then, prior to that single prayer, someone will have requested of the parents, I presume that's the verb request, and these parents would have filed or handed in a permission slip, for want of a better term.
Yeah, and the way the students have
for each and every prayer.
No, the way the students have talked about implementing this is their group would meet. Everybody from the Benton football team would come in and say, look, we're all okay with Coach Moore praying with us.
So beginning of the season.
Beginning of the season. Now if you have any players that jump on the team, then the coach would know, hey, I could get, and the handbook says if I bow my head, kneel, or anything while the team captain's praying, I could be fired. So the coaches are going to need this assurance that they can be in the room as the kids pray before the game or after the game. But no, it's not each prayer, it is each group.
And so for each group, then, would they then also specify that it would only be a type of prayer? So it would only be a Christian prayer?
No, it is it's basically like I signed a waiver so that my daughter, Catherine, or her teacher, I'm not going to mention her name, but that her teacher, specifically that teacher's name, could pray with my child at any time. One child came up with a waiver that said she didn't mind everybody in the school praying with her child. So I mean that's what.
So if you had that waiver then signed and it did not specify person's name, religion, orientation, those specifics, which I think would be clearly in violation.
Correct.
Then if you had a substitute teacher come into the room who happened to be Muslim and crossed their hands over their chest, faced Mecca, and began to lead the class in prayer, there would be no ability to object
well, no,
to that.
That wouldn't happen because the permission slip is to a specific teacher or coach.
Well, you just said they didn't have a name on it.
No, it does. I put the teacher's name on it. When my daughter passed away last year, I was okay with the specific teachers praying with my child. I was okay if they had Catholic prayers or Baptist prayers or any kind of prayers.
Muslim prayers, Jewish prayers.
Any kind. You see, I mean, that's... So with this, I want to be... Because that has been misconstrued also in the last 2 months. These waivers that the children have developed have the child's name and the teacher's name. Sometimes it has multiple teachers that the parent wants to give permission to. Sometimes it only has one teacher's name on it. But the teacher is who gets sued under the handbook, not the substitute. You see, if the substitute is showing any reference for prayer, they're breaking the handbook and they don't have any defense to that. Under our situation, the waiver is simply being used not to do anything to protect the teacher under the handbook. That's it.
Excuse me, Representative Falconer, your time is up. Would you like an extension of your time? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Amade for a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The discussion has been all over the place, and so I would like to ask at this time, Professor Gatti, could you please outline what are our religious liberties concerning this matter before this bill?
Currently, any student can pray in school. Any student group can pray in school together. As long as it's student initiated, that all falls under the free exercise clause because they are not the state. So they are protected in prayer and doing whatever they want in that regard during the school day. A teacher has also got protections to pray on their own, to wear religious like a cross or something if they wanted to even read their Bible, although there have been cases over that that's been upheld to protect the teacher's rights. And I don't know who drafted your particular district's handbook, but a teacher can bow their head when other people are praying, and in fact probably should, just out of respect for all religions. And that's specifically in the Doe case, by the way, that I was citing in Duncanville. They cannot, I don't know, taking a knee might take it too far. I don't know if that would be considered equal to bowing a head or not. But they can't hold hands. That was specifically said in the case, and stand in a circle and pray with the students, because that's the state. When I'm a public teacher, I teach at Southern University. Even with the criminal stuff, I have to think. I mean, I can't go through a student's backpack because I'm the state. I'm not. If I were in a private college, I could violate their privacy rights and it wouldn't be the same thing. But a teacher in a public school is the state acting, speaks for the state, represents the state. So anything the teacher does is not as an individual, during school hours, is not as an individual, but is as the state acting. And the state cannot endorse a religion and cannot, past that even, get entangled in religion, because you run into all the ifs, ands, or buts that I was maybe raised radically with Wiccan, but when you have a diverse society with a lot of different beliefs in that. Now, I would suggest, I mean, certainly before and after the school hours start, a teacher can pray with a student. Before and after school. Just because they wear the teacher hat doesn't mean that they can't pray with a student. So in his case with your daughter and with these students back here, if they wanted to go sit with a teacher, their favorite teacher, before classes start or after classes are over, and pray and pray and pray in whatever religion or denomination that it is, they're welcome to do that. That doesn't violate the Constitution. It's only when the teacher takes on the mantra of the state that they cannot actively pray with another student.
Okay, if I could ask you a couple of quick-fire yes and no questions, just to clarify my understanding of everything you just said. You're a professor at a state university.
I
am. Are the laws the same for you at a university as they are at an elementary school?
In this particular area, yes, but in in the broader religion in schools area, which include, Christmas scenes and things posted on the wall and that, the courts are much more concerned about younger children who are much more impressionable than. I have a student sitting at the dais right behind you. They're not impressionable at all, I don't think, or very little. With younger children, they're more impressionable. They want to follow rules and order. They're worried about what their peers think about them, and that sort of even peer pressure and school pressure and teacher
Representative
pressure.
Amadei, your time is up. Would you like an extension of your time?
Important.
A brief one, please.
Okay.
So at the elementary or even high school level, there would be greater restrictions on the teacher.
There are.
Could a teacher in a K through 12 school, when she sits to eat her own lunch, may she bow her head?
She may.
Okay, you're saying yes, he's saying no. This is interesting. Can the teachers gather around the flagpole for those before school events, prayer at the pole?
If it's before school.
Okay. And so we're talking about when the teacher is on the clock or on duty, that's when the restrictions apply.
Correct.
And yet the restrictions also apply at graduation ceremonies and football games.
Yes, and there have been some exceptions at graduation ceremonies because they're a once-in-a-lifetime event, but those exceptions are for the students that are doing the speeches at the end and not for the teachers. But
okay. Thank you for the clarification. That's all,
All right. Thank you, Representative Amadei. Representative Hall for personal privilege.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members and audience, I'd like to recognize a special group. We have from the Alexandria area the women, Democratic women of Alexandria, Pineville, and Rapides Parish. Would you please stand and recognize our members there?
Welcome to House Education and welcome to the Capitol.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hall.
Representative Evans has
All right. Okay. I thought I saw somebody's button push, but now the board is clear. We have a few more cards in support. Carolyn Rhymes with Protect Prayer in support but not wishing to speak. Stacy Walker with Protect Prayer in support but not wishing to speak. And Rhea Hope Spinks with Protect Prayer in support, not wishing to speak. There are no cards in opposition. Senator Representative Smith, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for coming late, Senator Gatti, but this gives an opportunity for a religious freedom for students, no matter what religion they are, to actually have their prayer, even though they're protected already under student-led prayer. But then it also allows them to encourage, or not encourage, but ask a teacher if they wanted to join via a waiver, is what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So any religion would have the opportunity to do that, which is what freedom of religion is. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
All right. I appreciate that. And I'd like to move favorable on the bill.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Smith. All right, members. The board is clear now. Senator Gatti, you may close on your bill.
You know, we had a great discussion today, and this is what America's all about. It's iron sharpening iron. That's what the Bible says. And you know, when the coaches called me initially when these lawsuits were filed, I read the lawsuit from Webster Parish, and in paragraph 81, they were written up because some local pastor came and talked on Veterans Day with veterans from all of our wars that are recently happening. And that nasty pastor talked about Acts chapter 7 and how these men are like Stephen. They stood up for what was right and they paid the ultimate price. And they went on about this nasty pastor who did that, and that dude was me. And I thought that was the nicest thing I've heard all year. Somebody called this lawyer and a politician a pastor. You know, it's really hard to be under this gag order where I come from. Lakeside High School said the Lord's Prayer every day since its existence until about a month ago. Teachers and people in the buckle of the Bible Belt, they pray with their students a lot. And because of Barksdale Air Force Base, we have a huge influence of people from all over the world and all backgrounds. And our society up there is known from welcoming those people and bringing them in and honoring their religion. In fact, my daughter's best friends are of diverse religious backgrounds, and they talk about how much they love our area because we don't just we wear our religion on our sleeve. We try to help others and live it out. There's been a lot of concerns brought up about this bill, and there's a lot of confusion, but it's very simple. And Representative Smith asked the right questions, and she understands it, that there's no reason for a teacher or a coach to be in a classroom worried about being fired when every child in that classroom, we're not talking about a classroom with a Wiccan and a Muslim and a Baptist and a Catholic, we're talking about kids that all go to church together. They just happen to go to a public school. The parents want the choice. The parents want the power in the public school system to determine who pours into their child. This simply takes into account all of the Supreme Court cases. Those cases are have one thing in common. One parent of a child says, I don't like you praying with my kid. I'm going to fight it. This bill fixes that, because the coach, the teacher will know now, based on your handbook and based on this law, you cannot pray with your team if one person holds out. And then what it really does in the Christian faith is it lets the coach kind of give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to give to God what is God's. That coach needs to know this, because the coaches I've talked to, this is one of the heaviest weights they're carrying right now, because they provide for these men on their football team who are typically from single mom families, and they provide for them, they nurture them, they pray for them, they take care of them, and this has devastated them because they can't do it. So I just say give them a little bit of hope in this situation, and allow this bill to pass through, and allow the parents to have the final choice in the religious upbringing of their children. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator Gatti. Representative Smith has moved that we report Senate Bill 512 favorably. Is there any objection? Representative Edmonds, you have your button pressed. Are you objecting? Okay.
There's not one major Christian defense that I can find anyone that does not believe that this puts us in great perils for all the religious freedom that we've experienced and have worked so solidly on. And I'm as torn and as downtrodden as I can be on an issue as this, because I'm as for what you're trying to do, but I really believe this brings more damage than good. And I hate to even take the front on the microphone, but I mean, this is my life, and I have to oppose this. And I don't know what else to say. It's a heartbreaking issue for me personally.
All right, members, Representative Smith has moved that we report Senate Bill 512 favorably. Representative Edmonds opposes the motion. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please? A yes vote is a vote to report the bill favorably. A no vote is to not report the bill favorably.
Representative Hall? Yes. Votes yes. Representative Amadei? No. Representative Bowie? Yes. Yes. Representative Brass? Yes. Yes. Representative Carter? Yes. Yes. Representative Edmonds? No. No. Representative Emerson? Yes. Representative Falconer? No. No. Representative Hilferty? Yes. Yes. Representative Leger? Yes. Yes. Representative Simon? Yes. Yes. Representative Smith? Yes. Yes. Representative Thomas? Yes. Yes. Representative Wright? No. Passes 10-4.
The motion passes 10-4, and we will report Senate Bill 512 favorably. Thank you, Senator
Thank
Gatti.
you, Madam Chairman, and I appreciate y'all's time today.
Thank you.